This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right, it is not. It is a receiver of sport. Because love is my first technique.
it's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles. Thank you for joining us from whatever altitude you are at, and we're encouraging you to be at Mile High altitude in September. We're also encouraging you to hit subscribe. So whatever platform you are listening, watching this on, whether it be iTunes or Stitcher or YouTube or Spotify, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss a Mile High Tick, any Mile High Tick, and you most certainly don't want to miss Mile High Tick on higher ground. So you can find out all the details about that at riseuptomilehigh.com, and we look forward to seeing you at 5,280 feet in September, September 26th, 29th, where you will see this guest, who is the only guest in Mile High history to be able to do her presentation from the parking lot, which Dr. Liz Anderson-Peacock, who is just an incredible soul, will be presenting. And at the end of 2017, after a right below knee amputation, she applied different approaches to find a new base of support. And she openly shares her experience, how her choices dramatically and positively impacted her outcome, with the hope that her insights inspire and reflective, proactive practice to how we listen to and care for empowering our patients. And I have to tell you, following her, she inspires me. She already inspired me before that, but many people know I had my own health battles, and I watch how much she dances through this new stage of her life. And I know it's not always a dance, but she, does. And she's a popular speaker at many events, and she's published in peer-reviewed journals. And so she's just an incredible soul, and be sharing incredible wisdom, as she did after a fire alarm in the parking lot of the hotel a few years back at Mile High. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Liz.
Thank you so much. And actually, we had the 2 fire alarms. I just started, then we had to exit the room, we get back in the room, a second alarm, then we go to the parking lot, and then it's like, okay, well, it is what it is. We adapted.
But if you remember, we had cookies.
Yes, we did have cookies. Everything's good as long as we have cookies.
The hotel put out fresh baked cookies, like to try to, apologize, which people love the cookies. So.
There was a little bit of attrition, though, I will say, after the second alarm. People are like, okay, I'm just very well also Dr. David Fletcher, who's going to be there this year. There was a different Mile High where he was, it was a different one where there was huge thunderstorm, and it was so loud in the hotel. It was just so loud, the thunderstorm. He thought he was like under attack. So we all roll with the instabilities that life presents us as best as we can, and those are 2 great examples of that. Let's share, first of all, briefly, how did you find your way in the chiropractic world? Okay, so there were sort of 2 or 3 things that were sort of going on in parallel. And one was, I was at university and I was doing a Bachelor of Science degree, and I watched a number of my friends go into medicine, dentistry, law, and chiropractic. I didn't even know what chiropractic was. And I learned a little bit about it. And what was really interesting is that my friends, when they came back after their first year that were in chiropractic, they're talking about life and potential and integration and, functional neuroscience and how the body responds to its environment. We need to make sure that we're interpreting to be able to respond properly. And they were loving what they were doing, and they couldn't wait to get their hands to palpate you. And it was very different from the other fields that I saw. And I went, well, this is kind of interesting. And so I delved into it a little bit more, finally went to a chiropractor. And my experience in going was interesting as well, because my perception was you only went when you were in pain, when I learned about chiropractic. And when I went, this chiropractor is looking at my whole spine, which I'm sort of like, I'm not sure why you're looking at my whole spine. I had ended up hurting myself and had a low back SI issue, whatever it was. And I thought the focus should be right where that is. And then she explained to me how everything is interrelated to everything. Okay, that made sense. Then she's in my neck and she's finding these issues with my neck. And I'm like, I don't even really know why you're in my neck. But this was the key thing, is she'd asked me if I ever had problems with allergies, if I'd had any bad accidents that I could remember, and recognizing, of course, you know, kids have accidents that we don't remember, or we don't, whatever, we don't remember them. Anyways, and so my little tuning fork went up, and my you know, had a really severe car accident as about a 2 or 3 year old. It was before we had car seats, before we had seat belts, and I hit the dashboard and had 2 black eyes. And I remember vaguely them checking out the front. I don't remember anything about my back or neck or anything being checked. I mean, I was pretty little at the time. And then later on, I asked my mother and she couldn't remember either. But that was sort of one insult. And then what was really interesting is that I was the only child in my family that had had allergies. And I mean allergies, seasonal allergies, and they were severe. 10 years, allergy shots once a week, no change. I used to wake up with pyrobenzamine, dime tap, or Allerest beside my bed as a kid, remembering if I could drink my water with that pill, then I'd have no symptoms, therefore I'm healthy. So this chiropractor all of a sudden is asking me about breathing and sinuses and runny and watering eyes and allergies. And I'm like, what the heck does that have to do with my neck? And let alone whatever, right? And so then the next question was the key one, was because she said, well, what causes your allergies? And I'm like, pollen's in the air. I could rattle them all off. And she said, well, if pollen's in the air cause allergies, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yes.
If pollen's in the air cause allergies and you and I are breathing the same air, would we not also be breathing in the same pollens? Yes, of course, is the answer. So then if you have symptoms and I don't have symptoms, if pollens cause allergies, why is that? And that was the transformational question, because I had to say, I don't know. And I want to find out, because you're absolutely right. Why is my body making one decision as a hyper response while your body is making a normal decision where you might sneeze every once in a while when you get too many pollens, you have to clear them out? So then she proceeded to ask me about the immune system and if I understood how the immune system and the nervous system talk to each other, which I vaguely knew through psychoneuroimmunology, but not at the level of which the discussion was occurring. And then I had my experience of an adjustment, and it was like someone taking earmuffs off my ears, even though I'd never tested for a hearing problem. And it was like my clarity went from just a 4-cylinder to an 8-cylinder vehicle, right? It was like this cloud in my brain that I'd never known anything different. And I can't say it ever affected me because I didn't know any different, but there was just such an instant change. I went, that's what I want to do. And that's how I got into chiropractic.
We have another thing in common, which is that I originally went to a chiropractor. I had allergies. So isn't that interesting?
Yes, yes.
My mom brought me as a teen, and that was when the allergies went away. And she decided to go to chiropractic school based upon that, because she had, saw such a big change. So it's interesting how these things bring us into chiropractic. So, with that, what are some of the favorite things that you love to share with the public? I'm not talking about fellow chiropractors, but with the public about the gifts of chiropractic.
Well, I think the gifts of chiropractic is, when I think of it, is that we use the spine as our conduit into the nervous system. And the nervous system integrates information from external to internal, makes decisions, and then externally again. So we want to have the best and most flexible ability for our body to comprehend the world in a way that is the most accurate that we can get, and then make the most appropriate response. And this is where the public, I think, quite often gets confused, because here I just talked about my allergies and they're like, yeah, well, there's no evidence that chiropractors treat allergies. And that's absolutely true from the standpoint of like randomized controlled trials. It's not what we would normally think of. But when you're looking at a holistic totality of the body, how I saw that with my allergies, which is why it changed my course of action, was that my body was comprehending the environment differently, therefore it chose a different response. And that's why it's sort of all of these, not all, but many things can change under chiropractic care. So that's sort of one way I like to think of it. The other thing is that I look at the ripple effect in that when we can calm that nervous system through accessing the spine and giving patients strategies for home care, then we can move our bodies really from this sense of survival into being more creative. And I like to say we're far more creative and resourceful than we've ever been led to believe. The challenge is that we've been dumbed down. And I mean dumbed down as in we either haven't been taught, or we've forgotten, or we intuitively knew, but oh, we're not being supported. And, you know, it's sort of a lot of this sort of ancient wisdom in many modalities, it's harder and harder to find these days. And what I love about chiropractic is it kind of can bring us all together in looking at the body as vibration and frequency, but also particle and matter as well. And we have to morph these two things to recognize the nervous system works on tone, the muscular system works on tone. And when we start looking and bringing in the conversation of tone, then it's a matter of what string do we want to pull to change our tone, if you will.
And you know, that whole thing chiropractic found about tone, you may have heard that before. It's so sad that that concept has been, you know, or that truth has been taken out of so much of our chiropractic education.
It is. And, you know, the one thing it's really interesting. I connect with a group of doctors, medical doctors, and some scientists. And it's very interesting because I tell them about the major premise in chiropractic, and they just go like, and they're very much into this, not the world of chiropractic, but in the world of vibration and frequency and tonality. And when you tell them that the major premise is that there is a universal intelligence in all matter, which continually gives to it all of its properties and actions, thus maintaining it in existence. And so we all become, I'm going to say, extensions of energy, right? Extensions of feeling like we're physically separated, but really are we separated when we go to the, you know, the quantum level, if you will, when we go to source level. And they understand that. And people generally will understand that when you break that down into what does that actually mean. And when you have something that's living, it can recreate, it can reproduce, it can heal itself as long as you have this life force within it. But everything is a subset of this universal intelligence. And so it's fascinating. So a rock has intelligence, it just can't express itself, right? Because I could take a rock to 20 geologists and they could tell me exactly what that rock is made of. They could break it all down and it's going to be consistent. They could do the same thing, well, maybe not a geologist, but a pathologist could do the same thing with a living being. And then, but when you now have this absence of life in the prior living being, it starts to break down. It can't recreate, can't reproduce, you know, doesn't have all those properties of something that's alive. So the question often goes to people is, if things are designed to be recreating and healthy and well, when we're not experiencing that, what's getting in the way? What needs an adjustment in our life?
And that's a really important thing to say, because people tend to think, well, there's something outside me that I have to fix as compared to what is my part in this, you know, and what do I have to shift and what is this telling me? Which then brings me to this question. Instead of what you love teaching the public, what do you love sharing with chiropractors?
Again, I think it's a matter of us understanding that we need to get into the present moment and have our awareness in the present moment so that we can pick up the nuances that are in front of us. And we're sensing it through observation, we're sensing it through our skilled palpation. And then there's other things, you know, there's emotionality or reactivity of the patient that's telling us, oh, did they want to tell me something and they just didn't feel safe enough? Or do I need to pry a little bit, probe a little bit further on that? That could be that pivotal piece that changes everything, that they just need to get out and off their chest, but might feel silly or unsupported in the past. There can be, I think when we get into that moment, when I talk about the nuances, it's our looking at the body language of the patient, the tone in which the patients are speaking in, which will tell us a lot about their emotional state, if you will, which byproduct comes into their nervous system and what we're going to pick up. So I think really to me, the key piece is how do you get into the moment, stay in the moment, be the conduit for information coming through you, because information will come through somewhat intuitively or through a sixth sense on when to, where to adjust, when not to adjust, when to change a conversation or add something new, when to ask a new question. And I think that's really pivotal. And then it's also our skill level goes up, right? In what we're palpating. It's the nuances that we see with our patients. And so I think that's really the key thing that we've always heard as being PTC, present time consciousness. And really that's about having an acute level of awareness in the moment. So we're not going, we come in with intention and a focus or attention, yet within that we want to be present so that we can move our energy, our vibration, our care in the direction that's best going to suit the patient for where they are showing up in that day, on that day.
Yes, yes. Now, somewhere along the way, you ended up getting to have the pleasure of being involved with Larry Webster and Genome and the ICPA. How did your journey end up being involved with there, and what were some of the joys of that?
Well, initially I did the ICA Diplomate, and there was quite a few speakers that were, like Larry Webster did a 12-hour module with us when I was doing my ICA Diplomate. And he actually had asked me to do, once I did my Diplomate, he asked me to do a couple of courses for him as he was starting to expand his program. The programs all started at the same time. His was 120 hours. The one I was doing was 360 at that point. Anywho, so I did a couple of classes for him. And then sadly, he passed away, and he was a gem. And I've got sort of an interesting story about prior to him passing. I can share that later. And then it was really the board, the ICPA asked me to then do some teaching. And initially I did a module teaching on pregnancy with the perspective of chiropractic. And then I did one on communication. I did another one on transformational pediatrics, which was implementing all the information you have, because over the years, one of the things I don't like seeing is when people go to a seminar and they don't implement what they've learned. So we now create a structure where people can implement what they've learned.
That happens? That doesn't ever happen, does it?
Oh, no. And it's usually because people are so overwhelmed, right? So that's the whole piece. And so, so I did that teaching for a little bit. I helped develop their Diplomate program and was an examiner for them. And I was really blessed to be able to participate in that. Yeah. And so I was teaching up until the point I had my amputation, needed to take some time off for the obvious reason that I wasn't quite sure when things were going to transpire, and they needed to keep their program obviously running with other people involved. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, with all of that, what are you excited to share from the stage at Mile High?
So I'm going to really hone in on the Tanner model of clinical judgment, which sounds really dry, but it's not. It's really quite exciting because it's a 4-step process that I think we can use not just within our own practices in every element that we do in our practice. When I mean element, I mean history, assessment, a regular office visit, adjustment, follow-up care, blah, blah, blah. But staff can use it, spouses can use it, and we can use it outside of our practice. And it's very, very well documented model. And it has this 4-step series parts to it. It's pretty simple. It's notice, interpret, respond, and reflect. So it's a matter of, collecting data information. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to organize it? What do you need to, park? What do you need to act on? Giving yourself a strategy. Then how are you responding when feedback is coming at you? And then how are you contemplating at the end of the day so that you can continue to be under a Kaizen model, which is that constant never-ending improvement, as they say in Japan. And so I think that it's a really succinct model, very easy to apply. And I use it with some of my grandkids. Not that I break it out like that, but it's like notice, interpret, respond, reflect. Sometimes it's reflect, 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 and that's all good. Yeah.
Well, that's all super exciting, super exciting. Now, I'd like to ask you this. Instabilities. One of the things that's interesting as a chiropractor, both you and I, is we tend to think nothing's going to happen to us because we get chiropractic care, and that that's not true. Things happen to us in our lives, and we have to navigate instabilities that are presented to us in terms of our health, and then like we have to present, all the stuff we teach our practice members about health and well-being, and then we have to apply it to ourselves because now we have to face those things. How has that been with your journey of what you've had to navigate with instabilities in your health lately?
Yeah, so I never think of them as instabilities. I think them as opportunities in disguise. I really do. And I've always sort of believed that the one constant in life is change. And so when any event comes in any moment, I have a choice of how I want to respond to it. And there are different options. I can have a gut instinct. I can have a reflex. I can be angry. I can be inspired. The piece with it is what is going to best serve me when I'm moving myself into a future. And that's really how I look at things, in that, I may not be able to understand why something has happened. And at that point, it doesn't really matter because, well, it does and it doesn't. It does because you don't want to repeat it, but it doesn't because as I'm in the process of healing, it doesn't serve me in that moment to rehash what went wrong or what I did and then beat myself up. And what's important is, where am I now? Where do I want to go? What's going to mitigate? What are the challenges that might get in the way that I have to mitigate? And what are the opportunities that I need to embrace? And how do I want to be in that moment? And this is something really interesting, because I think most people can relate to this through COVID, is that there were so many people that were so scared of living. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're not living, like, any one of us could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and life is about living, and there is risk to life by its very, very nature. And I recognize that everyone has a different tolerance for risk and a different tolerance for their own what's the word I'm wanting to use? Their confidence in themselves and their confidence in their body. And I think that those are the things that are the real opportunities for us to learn something new. And when we get into that survival mode, that stress response, that reactivity, how can the physiology of the body ever spend energy on healing?
Right.
How can it move us into the potential for a different future, or for more hope, or for calming and balancing that autonomic nervous system to allow for healing to really occur, which should happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And you hit the key phrases of survival or reactor. When that happens, the potential, when you're in that perspective, and those are real perspectives, for sure. And when you have those perspectives, it's hard to see the potential.
100%. Like, for example, when I first had my pathology report that was reported to me over the phone on a Tuesday night, and it was literally, my doctor phoned and said, Liz, I have your report. By the way, you have a synovial sarcoma. I want to remind you that's malignant because you've had it for so long. I want you to get a chest CT to make sure it hasn't metastasized to your lungs and to your head and to your brain. And I'm like, what? Was not expecting that. So absolutely, right then, I'm in survival. I'm like, okay, felt like my stomach had dropped to the floor. In that moment, it was, what does this mean to me, my life, my husband, my family, my practice, my friends? What the heck, right? Then, though, my refractory period was pretty shortened, because then I went into my doctor mode, into my intellectual mode on, I got to look up synovial sarcoma and remind myself what this all means. So I'm madly doing all that in my options. And I'm literally doing that. And I look up at my library, and the book that literally pops out in my vision is Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. And I just smacked. So I went that fast within one night, with one evening, that fast into, a cell cannot be in stress and defense and healing and growth at the same time. So Liz, pick which cell, which direction you want this to go in. And so for me, that happened very quickly. Now, the results of it took a lot longer as well to move it through to fruition. However, it can be that easy. again, we have the advantage of knowledge as well, and certain words I recognize we either give them power or we can disempower those words as well. We give them
Right.
meaning or not.
Right. Well, you just hit the nail on the head of something that we teach in the network world, which is there's a survival, a reactor, then there's the thinking mind, right? And then there's a spirit and soul level. Like you just walked through all of those in about 60 seconds, which is really
Yeah.
fun. And when we talk about when you're addressing patients, it's like where are they and how do you be aware of where they are, and also hold them at least one step forward of where you'd like them to be as a potential, and help them facilitate that with them and guide them to that, because and honor where they are instead of making it bad or wrong. It's just what they have access to at the current organizational capacity that they're experiencing the world, and that there's another potential, but they're not having the access to it at the bandwidth that they're currently experiencing their life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves by the vibration in which we're working on. And again, people intimately know this, because try having a rational discussion with somebody that's angry, right?
Right.
The potential just to have that discussion isn't there with the way that their physiology and their ability to listen and truly listen with an active mind. And, I was on a podcast listening to a webinar a while ago, and I heard a psychologist drop a beautiful phrase, and it's called having compassionate latitude. And with respect to patients, and it's giving patients the grace and the benefit of the doubt that they are doing the best they can with the skills that they currently have, the knowledge they have, and where they are in their life. And yeah, there may be some exceptions to the rule, but what if we were able to always give that compassionate latitude to the people that we are interacting with?
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so now, navigating these different places you've been in terms of practice, teaching professionally, with the ICPA, teaching professionally on your own, and seeing the gamut of those, the joy of giving those gifts as a chiropractor, which is so fun, and seeing all of that. How do people get to connect with you these days? What gifts do you get to enjoy giving these days to chiropractors in the chiropractic profession?
Well, I think it's probably just people can connect with me because I'm available. I'll put it that way. And my purpose really is pretty simple, and it's always been to transform lives. And chiropractic is one of the venues in which I can do that. Speaking sometimes is one of the venues in which I can do that. But it's for people to start to have that light bulb moment where they recognize that they, as I've said before, they're far more creative and resourceful than led to believe. They just need to tune in to that voice within, and tune out the good opinions of external people that are harpies that are telling them how to live their lives, versus intuitively finding what's right for them, and to define a life on success on their terms versus the perceptions of what other people have. So I would suggest that people can reach me, and people do reach me mostly through social media or through my website and things like that. And I like to do lots of different things. I like to also keep it in the unknown a little bit, because that keeps it surprising and fresh for me. And in the past, everything was relatively so regimented that I lost some of the joy of the surprise when all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's go do this. It's one of the reasons why I love scuba diving. Mm-hmm. It's not as if you don't know what you're going to turn a corner and you're going to see in front of you. So it's living in that moment and living in that unknown and placing yourself in that as well.
Well, I'm super excited for you sharing at Mile High, because I love getting to see you share anywhere I get to see you, because it's really a real gift to hear from you, both one-to-one as well as from stage. Through this, I've always enjoyed conversations with you. So I still remember that time when we went to have dinner in South Carolina, somewhere around Lyceum, and it was just such a joy. So, with that, what do you feel you want to share relative to the chiropractic profession, where the chiropractic profession is now, and where you would like to see chiropractors, chiropractic students, what direction you'd like to see them facing?
Well, I think where we are now is all dependent on what style of practice you have, because there's chiropractors that are, that are super busy, that have completely different models. And then there's other chiropractors that are really struggling. And the struggle concerns me because I don't think that needs to be so.
Hmm.
And so I like to say that people that are struggling, perhaps it's time for you to look at your response and how available you are to learning new information and or being reflective for yourself, so that you can learn something new and maybe apply things in a different way. The potential, that's a hard one. I mean, I like to always say that the potential is always there. And I do believe that over the last few years, people are searching for more people are searching for what we have to offer. And it's about the clarity of the message and the clarity of the message and the consistency of the message that makes the difference. And then creating the opportunities for patients to have the aha moments where we're not necessarily teaching them, but we are inspiring them, and they're having an experience in which they own the experience, where they then can share that with other people. And really, that's how chiropractic grew initially, right? It was word of mouth, people that were inspired, chiropractors that were staying in their lane consistently, not watering things down, telling things like they were, like it is, focusing on the spine, focusing on the adjustment, and they were masterful adjusters. And now what's wonderful is there's so many different tools that we can use in our toolbox on whether I'm dealing with a pediatrics or cranial or, again, network, whether you're doing BEST, whether you're doing torque release, activator, Gonstead, diversified. All of these have a beautiful, they all serve in the symphony that's played within the profession. So I believe that there is a lot of potential in what we do. And it's one of the reasons why I keep doing it. And it's one of the reasons why I keep getting these kind of wacky patients that have, when I say wacky, I mean just these things that are just so bizarre that are going on with them. And they start to settle and everything starts to become they're clearer for them. There's greater clarity. They sort their way through and they are living in a future potential, which is being able to be fully human.
Yeah, and I gotta say, because I've been in the profession for a little bit now, just like you, and I feel like an energetic renaissance going on. I feel like there's an energetic renaissance towards our principles and values more and more. You said searching. I think more and more people that maybe did not learn more about the chiropractic principles and values in their education are searching for something more and getting attracted to something more that we know has been there all along. And I feel like there's an energetic renaissance of chiropractic and chiropractors looking towards who we really are.
100%. I mean, what person doesn't want to be talking about the excitement of being more of a fully human, functioning human being, right? That when you can get out there and do what you love and love what you do and do it on fire on all cylinders and be able to interpret and respond to the world in a new way. I mean, how is that not exciting? And it's a heck of a lot better than focusing on pain alone. And I'm not going to say that we shouldn't also have times where we need to be very responsible with what we're focusing on, but it's building the bridge that there is more than just that. And by focusing on the one thing, what we're losing is the opportunity and the potentials for changes even in that one thing. That when we have, as I say to a patient, when you have a moment with no pain, celebrate that. Because the more of you celebrate that, the more we create a potential, and know that if your body can do that for a moment, it has the potential for doing that for more moments. Why wouldn't, right? And that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, so thrilled to have you join us in Colorado. You know, we were talking about this before we got this going live. We talked about how beautiful it is to visit Colorado, you know, and telling people you gotta where do you suggest people visit when they come out if they can make the space to be here for an extra half day or day?
Well, certainly for a half day, I would say Estes Park because it's absolutely accessible and it's available within a half day. If you're more daring, just get up into the mountains, you know, and I mean, I love Vail, I love Aspen, you can get into the upper plateaus. It's an amazing state.
Yeah.
It's
And I gotta say, it's
amazing.
right at that time. We moved it, we used to have it in August, we moved it to September. And it's the time when the leaves are changing. And it's like, to not do that, you're almost robbing yourself to just go and get not just the recharge professionally, but also get a recharge personally and energetically that way. So, and I'll tell you, if you got your team and you go up into the mountains with them for a half day and you brought them to a seminar, that'll also create, more energy in your practice. So there we go. And Dr. Liz, again, can't wait to see you on Higher Ground in September. Is there any last thing you'd like to share with chiropractors?
I'll be bringing my cowboy hat. I sadly can't wear my cowboy boots because my prosthetic foot won't fit into them, but I will bring my cowboy hat. And
I love it. I love it.
And
Love it.
yeah, it's going to be a fun time. And again, the thing I wanted to say to colleagues is move yourself from survival to creation and recognize, as I've said before, we are far more creative and resourceful than ever led to believe.
Oh, I love that move from survival to creation. I love that. Well, look forward to seeing everybody in Higher Ground September 26th, 29th. If you have not reserved your seats, make sure you do that. RiseUpToMileHigh.com is where you can get all the details. And you don't want to miss any Mile High ticks, so hit subscribe if you have not hit subscribe already for the Mile High podcast. Look forward to seeing you in Colorado in September. Dr. Liz, look forward to seeing you. And thank you for all the gifts you give to the chiropractic profession and continue to give.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Keep changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.